Coming up in this video, we check out some old planes, we find a ruin we didn't know existed, and I struggle to film any wildlife on International Wildlife Day, ironically. So come along with us as we have a nose around Danbury Common and Stow Maries. In this video, we decided to do a short walk from Danbury Common down to Stow Maries, a World War I airfield museum which we shall cover later. The route we took was fairly basic. We headed through Danbury Common, then along the main road to Bicknaker. From there we followed a series of footpaths going across fields and through some small woodlands until we reached Stow Maries Airfield, before heading back much the same way. So this is Danbury Common. It doesn't look like much right now at this time of year, but later on in the spring this area will be rich with rare plants and insects. It is a site of special scientific interest and the area is co-managed between the council here, the National Trust and the Essex Wildlife Trust. I did keep my eyes peeled for any interesting wildlife, but apart from a few muntjac deers which managed to evade us on a few occasions, we weren't lucky enough to really see anything. The next section was along the main road down to Bicknaker, where, as per usual, we stopped for a bite to eat. This place, the Signet Room, has only recently opened apparently. It's a nice little cafe and definitely worth stopping at if you happen to be following our route at all. Soon after, we were briefly walking back on the roads. Our route took us onto the B1418 for a bit before the footpath split off. Although one thing worth mentioning is that it seems that the pub on the road, the Drunken Dragon, has a deck chair outside specifically to seat a dragon when it visits. Before long we passed through Frith Wood, yet another site which I'm sure will be beautiful in just a few weeks, but is currently still in a hibernating state. Once out in the fields though, we did spot these wild primrose flowers growing in some of the ditches, a welcome sign of spring's arrival. Spotting wildlife on this walk was a nightmare, which is ironic given that it was International Wildlife Day. I did spot a buzzard up on a barn roof, but by the time the camera was recording it had already flown off. So these seagulls behind me is about the most wildlife I've seen all day.
And they've already flown off.
And they've already flown off! Look at that! The wildlife spotting front got a little better with the sighting of this goldcrest, which along with the firecrest are the UK's smallest birds. They're fairly restless, mind you, which makes recording them particularly difficult. The woodland that they were living in has developed a thick carpet of bluebells which have just begun growing. Again, in just a few weeks this area will look beautiful, but for the moment it's just brown and horrible. So we finally made it to Stow Maries, the last remaining unperverted World War I airfield in the world. The land here originally belonged to a dairy farmer, but the land was purchased by the government in 1916 for use by the Royal Flying Corps, the predecessor of today's Royal Air Force. It was opened for use by No. 37 Home Defence Squadron in 1917 for the reason of intercepting German Zeppelin and Gotha bomber raids on London. No. 37 Squadron also operated out of an airfield at Goldhanger and at Rochford, which is now the site of Southend Airport. The site at Stow was chosen because it sits slightly higher than the average flat fields of Essex, and at that point in time an advantage of a few feet was still something not to be sniffed at. Home defence squadrons did not have an easy time. They were expected to take off and intercept enemy aircraft, most often at night time, which, for the time period, without any navigation aids at all, was dangerous enough as it was, without combat. They were then expected to climb high into the darkness in an open, cold cockpit and either fire their machine guns at a huge 75-metre long airship or climb above them and drop Rankin darts, which are exactly what they sound like. To say that this was dangerous is an understatement. Of the 10 airmen who died operating out of Stow, 8 of them died as a result of accidents. Quite often the equipment granted to the home defence squadrons was subpar too. The commanders on the Western Front constantly needed more airmen and aircraft, and their plight often got them the best equipment. Those on home defence often flew aircraft which were not suited for the role at all, most notably the BE-2 and BE-12s. You'll see in a minute that the museum actually has a replica of one of these on display. But the BE-2 was a reasonably easy to fly and stable reconnaissance plane, but it was far too slow at climbing to be any good for catching enemy bombers that were already at high altitude. In fairness though, the bombing campaign in World War I was more about propaganda than any real strategic value. Bomb technology was very primitive in World War I compared with the destructive power of bombing raids in World War II at least. And so it's understandable why the home defence squadrons didn't get the support that they perhaps needed at the start. In April of 1918, however, the RFC disbanded and was absorbed into the newly created Royal Air Force. By that point, the squadrons had finally been given machines which were more capable, most notably with the SE-5, which is also, there is a quite smaller replica on display at this museum of an SE-5, and the Sopwith Camel. Improvements and building works continued at Stow Maries until the airfield was shut down, never to be reopened as a military facility again. But enough talking. By the end of 1918, let's quickly get on with a montage. The land was sold back to the dairy farm, and fortunately for us, they kept most of the buildings on site in an okay condition, although restoration works continue to this day. As you can see, most of the old buildings are still in existence and many have already been restored. Here is the old parade square. And the latrine still hangs the portrait of the German Kaiser Wilhelm II above the toilet. I'm not entirely sure if that's original, but it's a nice touch either way. Some of these old barrack buildings have been left in scaffolding for quite a few years now, but I believe that the museum is just waiting for the funds to fix it all up, and it will eventually be restored. Guess what time it is? No.
It's 2 o'clock.
No, it's tea time!
look at the shadow.
The joke is, we're gallivanting around the countryside looking for wildlife. We could have just come here, and it's on the screen. One last little historical story here before we go. There is a story which says that during World War II, a Hawker Hurricane landed here at Stow Maries after taking battle damage during the Battle of Britain. And as he switched off the engine and walked to the nearby farmhouse to use the telephone, whilst he was speaking with his squadron, a group of local kids climbed inside the cockpit and started firing his machine guns. And I always wondered if the pilot got a bollocking for not putting his guns on safe. We started to return towards Bicknacre pretty much the same way, although we did stop off at a few places, as you'll see in a minute. Having reached civilization again though, we did stop off for a quick refreshment. Hello.
Well, I'm going to add to the Snickers and Monsters feast with these.
I'm disgusted.
Oshi protein bars.
Yeah, they're low sugar.
That's what you want.
No, you want more sugar. So what? Right. What is the point of low sugar, salty caramel?
So you don't get diabetes. What's the point in a low sugar energy drink?
Good point. Oh.
Are they not very nice?
No.
Oh, fuck that then.
So this is a little bit like, if you imagine a choc ice, but instead of ice cream, you add that like 1980s white dog turd in there. That's that basically sums it up.
That is the best description.
Yeah. They're all the same thing. It was only as we passed back through Bicknacre that we realised that there was an old Priory ruin here, so we decided to stop and check it out. So this site was originally the site of a hermitage, but was built into a priory around 1154. Originally it was known as Woden Priory, before the surrounding village got its name. The priory housed the Black Canons, a group of Augustinian monks. Sadly though, the priory building had mostly collapsed by the mid-1800s. But fortunately, one of the landowners in the mid-1800s sought to reinforce this last remaining section of the building by pinning it with metal plates. I'll link the local history page in the description below for you if you want to check it out. Before we left the priory, we noticed that not too far away was the St Giles Leper graveyard, so we decided to head in that direction. So we're at St Giles Churchyard. I thought it said on the map that it was something to do with leprosy, but actually it's a modern-ish graveyard. But it's quite a special place because apparently there's loads of wildlife here. I can't see any. No wildlife appearing in this film at all.
don't know.
Okay, so I was wrong about this, and I should probably put others to rights who may also be confused regarding it. See, I thought leprosy was something that ended in the medieval times, but apparently it wasn't until the 1980s until there was some proper cure. Now, I came here to this little chapel thinking that the graveyard and this little church on the map were somehow part of medieval history, maybe connected with the Priory in some way, but in actuality this leper colony wasn't built until 1914, and it was called the Hospital and Homes of St Giles of Bicknaker.
Yeah, bit of wildlife, bit of feline domesticus.
All that was left to do was to head back to the main road and walk up to Danbury Common once again, back to the car. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed. If you haven't enjoyed it, I don't know why you're still watching, but there you go. If you have enjoyed, then please consider sticking around and maybe catch us in the next one. Bye for now.